Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wisdom Tradition podcast. Today I'm excited to be presenting the concluding article to this very long series on the history of the 20th century. And this article and this podcast episode is going to follow directly on the previous episode, part 10. These go together as like a two-part series. And so we're going to be picking up where we left off in that previous episode, which was to broadly discuss the existence of a new governance entity that emerged over the course of the 20th century, which I've called the technocratic superstate. And this emerged as a governing body of scientists and engineers and social planners, I guess I would say. So in this episode, I'm going to be looking at the UFO issue as a means to investigate further this idea that there is a deeply sort of secret classified technocratic superstate, as I call it. And this entity, this secret entity, emerges originally in the environment of the need to create a permanent secret black projects empire, basically. So this becomes a custodian of that secret black projects world. So my theory is that as we move into a global government situation, as we move into a one world nation, that in the process of that sort of coming about, the existence of this technocratic entity will be revealed, and so will the extent of the technologies that it has been developing in secret. And these include breakthrough energy technologies of the type that Nikola Tesla was once talking about. These also include things like UFOs, or anti-gravity flying vehicles. So that's why that sort of opens the door, this idea of UFOs, it opens the door to look at this technocratic entity, because in a sense it's the proof and is a symbol of the existence of this secret scientific governing body, and the idea that they're working with paradigms of science that are very different than the outer materialistic paradigm that is prevalent in outer society. So anyway, that's what we're going to be going into today. It's material I've worked on for a very long time to bring together, and so I hope it's all worth it. So anyway, let's get into it. The first section is called Roswell: What Happened and What It Tells Us. And so this will be the entry point into our investigation of this UFO mystery. All right, Roswell: What Happened and What It Tells Us. The year 1947 was a crucial one in terms of laying the groundwork for establishing a permanent technocratic superstate, a hidden scientific body concealed deep within the heart of the U.S. military-industrial complex. The purpose of this technocracy is to use scientific knowledge in order to re-engineer the world order into a system of global government, at which point a secret portfolio of breakthrough technologies thus far kept secret will be finally revealed and put to use. 1947 was a key year in the story of this entity's formation, as this was the year that an important piece of legislation, the National Security Act of 1947, was signed into law. Over time, this act has come to play a significant role in shaping the build-out of a permanent technocratic superstate. Today, this superstate is the dominant ruling power over American empire. Economist Mark Skidmore, writing in the Solari Report, informs us about what this important act entailed. It was, quote, a move to combine the War Department, the Department of the Army, the Department of the Navy, as well as several other military departments and agencies under the power of the newly created position of the Secretary of Defense. The most notable of these newly created departments and agencies was perhaps the CIA, which was formally established 2 years later with the CIA Act of 1949. But there was something else going on here too. As he writes, buried in all these sweeping governmental changes were the seeds that would create the black budget as we know it today. More specifically, through these acts, deliberate loopholes were put into place designed to compromise Congress's ability to oversee financial accountability within the U.S. government. This lack of accountability opened the door for billions and perhaps even trillions to be systematically siphoned out of the official government's balance sheet and redirected into the coffers of the black budget and black projects world. Now, with this act, and with others following in its wake, continuing its work, large quantities of financial flows could be non-transparently moved around, disguised, and redirected into the black budget, with none but a select elite having access to the nation's true financial accounting information. Not long after these acts were passed, further amendments were made to allow for this system to be extended into the private sphere so that corporate defense contractors could now be formally brought into it. The impact of the 1947 Act and its successors has had a transformational effect on American society. As financial analyst Catherine Austin Fitts explains, through this act and others like it that have followed, the U.S. government has implemented accounting policies that shift its governmental model from a constitutional republic to something else. And this new paradigm, quote, a small invisible group of people, we can't know who they are, can run the finances of the largest taxation and securities operation in the world by a secret process, we can't know by what process, and keep their decisions, the financial realities, and the financial facts of ownership and control secret. Who is this invisible group of people Fitts is referring to? In my view, what we're encountering here are the contours of a vast technocratic superstate, one that is spreading out to seize control of every aspect of American empire, consolidating the entire structure under the singular command of an elite technocratic entity, a think tank, one residing at the heart of a secret matrix of black projects being carried out deep within the inner shadow realms of the U.S. national security state. During the year 1947, another key event happening alongside this National Security Act took place, one that also interfaces closely with the story of the technocratic superstate's rise to power. The second event concerns the eruption of UFO sightings around the world. As UFO historian Richard Dolan informs us, 1947 was the critical year when the flying saucer symbol and the UFO catchphrase became widespread aspects of American pop culture. Modern UFO sightings date back to the airship mysteries of the 19th century. These were steampunk-esque anti-gravity vehicles being run by entirely human occupants. In my estimation, this early phase of the UFO program was being run by a network of secret societies and was fueled by their researches into the mysteries of alchemy. After initially gaining widespread media coverage, this early wave of sightings was soon hushed up, and all mention of the topic disappeared from public awareness for decades. This lasted until World War II, when the UFO topic began popping up again, this time in a totally different context. There was a famous UFO sighting in LA in 1942, and in the conflict zones of Europe, there were many reports of unidentified Foo Fighters of all types. During the war, there were also, as it turns out, well-founded rumors that the Nazi SS were secretly developing UFO technologies within their underground black projects world, ones they hoped to have ready for possible wartime use, a feat they luckily didn't accomplish. After the war, the topic briefly goes quiet again, but then all of a sudden, in the year 1947, it once again explodes into view, suddenly popping up in newspaper headlines around the world and becoming a talking point in everyone's mind. But now, for the first time, the UFO mystery will become deliberately associated with the idea of alien visitors. After 1947, the UFO meme becomes explicitly tied with the idea of aliens. No mention of Nazi programs or 19th century airships or secret society involvement is made. It's as if mankind never had any involvement with the technology before and was just now discovering it, something that is obviously not true. In my eyes, it appears as though 1947 marks the point when a major quote-unquote worldview perception management campaign was kicked off by hidden elements within the U.S. national security state. Its aim was to control worldview perceptions around the UFO issue by selling the idea of aliens as the source of the technology, while simultaneously disguising the existence of its true origin story. This 1947 worldview perception management campaign was built around two now famous and widely reported UFO incidents: Kenneth Arnold's UFO sighting and the supposed UFO crash at Roswell. Arnold's UFO sighting came first. As Richard Dolan explains, it was the sighting by private pilot Kenneth Arnold on June 24, 1947 that first made international headlines and created a new global awareness. This event was quickly followed by another, the Roswell incident, which took place only a couple weeks later in early July. The Roswell incident orbits around the supposed crash landing of a flying saucer in Roswell, New Mexico, an event that received headlines around the world. With this incident, the dam broke, so to speak, on the topic. As Dolan writes, finally the public was talking about this new phenomenon called flying saucers, and Roswell was the culmination. Upon closer inspection, the Roswell incident comes off as an elaborate, multi-layered black projects operation, i.e. a PSYOP, an ingenious worldview perception management campaign, one crafted with numerous layers tucked inside itself, each level targeted at a different element within U.S. society. Here the public was intended to walk away with one perception of the event, the lower level of the U.S. military command with another, and the more elite strata of the U.S. national security state with yet a third. The Roswell PSYOP is premised around the idea that a UFO crash really did happen. As Dolan observes, quote, there is a great deal of anecdotal testimony supporting the idea that an exotic and advanced craft went down near Roswell. For example, General Arthur Exon, who was a junior officer at Wright Field at the time, told researchers that in 1947 he had heard about the materials arriving from New Mexico as being incredibly exotic and mystifying to the best scientists. The fact that exotic materials were found is meant to imply that something alien produced them. The question is this alien entity an extraterrestrial, or could it be a human society possessing an advanced understanding of how to alchemically manipulate physical materials so as to make them appear alien? Clearly, one of the purposes of the Roswell PSYOP was to disguise the latter explanation, meaning that a secret society could be involved, by instead propping up the former, that anything exotic found at the crash site must by definition be extraterrestrial because no known human group is capable of producing it. But what about an unknown human group? Roswell seeks to distract our attention away from this question because when you begin to probe it, you discover not only the technocratic superstate, but also the existence of a secret society behind it. So the Roswell operation is not about faking a crash, but deliberately engineering one, with the purpose being to manage the reaction of this event at multiple levels at once: the public, the media, the overt military, and the covert deep state. Here we come to an important point. The Roswell PSYOP is not just designed to implant a meme about UFOs, its aim is also to implant memes regarding the existence of government cover-ups, the idea of a mysterious alien presence, the establishment of a secret scientific project dedicated to reverse engineering captured alien technologies, and so on. Since the beginning, the Roswell story has never been just about whether or not a crashed flying saucer took place. All these other inseparable elements also go along with it, and should therefore be understood as key elements of the PSYOP. Just consider how the story broke. After the initial crash happened, it was originally announced by local officials that the capture of a flying saucer had taken place. Soon after, federal officials stepped in and an obvious cover-up was instigated. Dolan summarizes what happened. Quote, for a brief moment one day, the world was treated to a headline confirming the capture of a flying saucer. 3 hours after the initial press release, however, the story was pulled, retracted, and then debunked. In this manner, we find two memes being implanted together at the same time as a pair: the recovery of a UFO crash and the government's cover-up of it. Both aspects of the story go hand in hand: the mystery of what actually happened and the architecture of the cover-up. By first revealing to the public the idea that a real incident had taken place, before then immediately debunking its own story, the planners of this operation were able to communicate to the public an implicit message. They were to distrust UFO reports, and there was no government interest in the issue. The press quickly picked up on this cue. As Richard Dolan explains, quote, in the aftermath of Roswell, press coverage of flying saucers practically ceased. The New York Times, Life magazine, and other major print media publications published dismissive articles. From this point onward, the UFO witnesses increasingly began to be portrayed as crackpots. And this is convenient because, as he also notes, from this point onward, unknown craft were more or less being reported with regularity within the U.S. military, and by civilians as well, with sightings becoming more and more commonplace. So as this issue is becoming more commonplace, it's being, the meme is being planted to distrust it. And so basically to prevent ideas and information from flowing around. So people who would experience it would keep it, private and not talk about it, and even distrust their own experiences about what they saw. So now the public was conditioned to look away and to assume the government has no involvement with the topic. And those who were suspicious were led down a rabbit hole of disinformation about aliens, a trail designed to go nowhere. In the meantime, a different angle of the Roswell PSYOP was targeting the worldview perception of the U.S. military. Here we find the Roswell crash presented as a deliberate mystery, one specially designed to sow confusion and doubt about the subject at every level of the U.S. national security state. For example, Dolan writes that, quote, according to Captain Edward Ruppelt, who later headed the Air Force's Project Blue Book and who had the opportunity to review the records of 1947, the situation in Air Force headquarters was, quote, confusion almost to the point of panic. And then he also said that the security lid was put down tight. So just consider the situation from the Air Force's point of view. In the context of the newly emerging Cold War, as Dolan tells us, quote, a mysterious phenomenon had appeared. Its source and intentions were as yet unknown, likewise its full capabilities. Nevertheless, whoever and whatever was behind the flying saucers, they appeared to be ahead of the most advanced human technology. Dolan emphasizes that one of the key truths Roswell revealed was that within the overt military and governance structure of the United States, quote, many senior officials and decision makers were not in the loop on the matter of flying saucers. Not everyone had a need-to-know clearance. So you see, the Roswell incident is revealing the fact that there is now a multiple-tiered, but at least a two-tiered stratum within the U.S. national security state itself. There was those who were read into this highly secret black projects world, and then there were those who were not, and who were instead focused on running the outer instruments of U.S. empire. The Roswell incident reveals the fact that clearly there were two tiers to the U.S. national security state, an elite realm involved in black projects, once concerning things like UFOs, and everyone else who was not. It was this latter group that was put into a panic by Roswell. They had no means to evaluate the issue, having been kept ignorant on the World War II era German UFO program, as well as the existence of a previous lineage of anti-gravity vehicles in America dating back to the 19th century. Not having any idea of the history of human involvement in developing UFO technologies, Roswell served as an opportunity to sell them on the idea of aliens as being the origin of these craft. They simply had no concept that a human group could actually be responsible for engineering this type of technology, let alone orchestrating an entire worldview management perception campaign, quote unquote, built up around the crash, one they had been set up to fall right into. So that is the end of the first section. Again, that was called Roswell, What Happened and What It Tells Us. And what it tells us is what I was just saying, that there's these two different tiers to the U.S. national security state. One that is involved in this black projects world, and the black projects world comes from Nazi Germany, basically, on one level. On another level, it comes from secret societies. So, that whole story is left out of the conversation, and instead we have this idea that the Air Force was in a panic over, what they had discovered, and so they were all set up to fall into an alien explanation. They didn't have any idea there were human operations involved with UFOs, so ergo must be an alien explanation. And so, as we'll be covering more as we go into this article further, there was a concerted effort to sell the alien explanation from an early point. So it seems that it's part of a social engineering operation. And so actually that's what we're going to talk about in the next section, because that is called Differing Worldview Perceptions About UFOs. All right, next section is called Differing Worldview Perceptions About UFOs. The panic Roswell caused within America's overt military command set the stage for a number of targeted follow-up reactions and responses to take place, ones perfectly staged to bring the U.S. military into the orbit of operations of an already existing but secret technocratic superstate. One primary effect of Roswell was that it formally introduced the idea to the U.S. military command that America needed to begin development of its own secret black projects program, one dedicated to reverse engineering alien UFOs. Of course, another black projects program already existed, one set up a few years prior and operating under an entirely different rationale. While the new program was to be focused on aliens, this older program was based around research into the alchemical mysteries of etheric energy. The Roswell PSYOP allowed this older alchemy-oriented program to stay secret, while at the same time inspiring the outer military to willingly create a new black projects program of its own, one the older alchemy-oriented program could secretly control. In fact, it was this older alchemy-related program who was the guilty party responsible for seeding the crashed UFOs into the outer program's hands. By building and crashing these vehicles, the inner program could present a deliberate puzzle to the outer program scientists, thereby controlling what they discovered and how they discovered it. The Roswell incident remains a mystery. The main questions surrounding it have never been answered. Who was behind the crashed saucer? Where did it come from? What were its intentions? In exploring these questions, we find traces of a PSYOP everywhere. No clear answers are given. Instead, the topic appears to have been made deliberately confusing and elusive, with different levels of the U.S. military hierarchy coming to different and often conflicting conclusions about the topic. In this light, is it really out of the question to consider the idea that an older legacy UFO program and or an ancient secret society working within it might have deliberately planted the Roswell crash and others like it as a means to conduct a social engineering campaign upon the outer levels of the U.S. military command? From its concealed location, this older program would be well positioned to secretly manufacture and seed crashed UFO vehicles into the lower program's possession, presenting them with a cunningly crafted mystery about alien technology, one they would get bogged down for decades studying, with this older program pulling the strings the entire time. Was this the goal, to build up a second Black Projects program so as to conceal the first? Was Roswell deliberately planned as a means to catalyze the outer military structure to authorize the creation of a second lower tier of Black Projects, one outwardly built up to study aliens but inwardly serving to conceal the operations of this older program, which was much more advanced? Setting aside the question of who was actually behind the project, one thing is clear. After Roswell, there emerged a concerted effort within the upper echelons of the U.S. national security state to sell the alien narrative as the official consensus explanation. In his book UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, Richard Dolan explains that after Roswell, there was originally, quote, a split in opinions at the very top. Consequently, the military's initial response was to embrace uncertainty and continue keeping an open mind about UFOs, without forming a provisional conclusion as to what they were. But soon there arose a powerful consortium of interests banded around the campaign to sell the alien explanation for UFOs. According to Dolan, this group, quote, had taken a firm hold in the Pentagon and many other agencies throughout the government. They had apparently formed a conclusion and were dead serious about the situation. They wanted a policy starting from the assumption that UFOs were interplanetary, and they wanted to stop any further release of information. The Roswell incident and the alien explanation for it came together to inspire the U.S. military command to embrace the idea of creating a permanent Black Projects empire, one dedicated to researching breakthrough technologies like anti-gravity vehicles. It is highly suggestive that the overarching pattern that the national security state comes to adopt in its response to Roswell is one that just so happens to mimic the architecture of the governance paradigm the technocratic superstate was seeking to put into place in order to advance its agenda for global government. Roswell helped inspire the outer sectors of the U.S. military to embrace the creation of a permanent Black Projects infrastructure. This inspiration was given to them in such a way, by means of the crash saucer, that they would believe that they were coming to the idea on their own volition, as if they were the ones to first conceive of such a scheme. This new outer Black Projects program, premised upon the idea of reverse engineering alien technology, would have its engineers occupied with solving the deliberate scientific puzzles presented to them in the form of these recovered alien craft. These supposedly alien-derived technological puzzles seeded into this lower-level Black Projects realm would keep its scientists busy while at the same time distracting their attention away from contemplating more advanced ideas, such as the fact that the whole phenomenon is actually rooted in the occult mysteries of alchemy. The Black Projects infrastructure that Roswell inspired the outer U.S. military hierarchy into forming was one perfectly designed to meet the larger agenda of both the technocratic superstate and the secret society operating within and behind it. You have to admit, the whole operation was ingeniously conceived and executed. By means of Roswell, America's outer military hierarchy was sold on the idea of re-engineering its own structure so as to accommodate the creation of a secret Black Projects empire. One built around the premise of reverse engineering captured alien vehicles. In the meantime, an already existing Black Projects program dedicated to alchemy rather than aliens could be protected and concealed within this new outer structure. Through the military's acceptance of the alien explanation for Roswell, the real mysteries were kept away from it. These involved the mysteries of alchemy, secret societies, new governance paradigms, all-encompassing social re-engineering plans, and the grand quest to establish a new Atlantis. The mythology built up around the alien explanation completely masks the existence of these greater mysteries. Could that have been the whole point? In the official mythology that would come to be accepted by those working within the new post-Roswell Black Projects matrix, the U.S. military initially began their experiments with UFO technology only after first laying hands on a crashed alien vehicle in 1947. As the story goes, this crashed vehicle, along with others like it, were used as the basis to begin a secret Black Projects program dedicated to reverse engineering alien technology. This is a convenient mythology for this group to accept, since it allows a pre-existing secret technology program to remain concealed and unacknowledged from their worldview perception. In reality, this whole level of Black Projects programs, ones dedicated to reverse engineering alien-related technology, was created as a deliberate front or mask, one intended to conceal an already existing technocracy-controlled Black Projects empire, one based on the pursuit of alchemical rather than alien knowledge. Thus, we discover that Roswell was part of a larger social engineering operation, one carried out in order to advance numerous key strategic goals of a superior parent project being run by a heavily concealed entity, the technocratic superstate. A secret technology R&D program had already been in effect in America for some time. Roswell allowed it to extend its reach into the overt structure of the U.S. national security state and re-engineer it into a form that it could better control and use as an instrument of its own larger agenda. Because of Roswell, the technocratic superstate, officially formed only a few years prior, could now extend its operational architecture into every aspect of U.S. empire. And this could be done in a concealed manner, with operations being carried out under the concealment of two major cover stories, the alien presence and the Cold War. In short, the Roswell operation helped catalyze the restructuring of the entire national security state. After 1947, it was transformed at every level. Roswell was one component in a larger social engineering operation, one designed to allow a central unseen technocratic superstate to secretly take control of the entire structure of the U.S. military and reorganize and restructure it, fitting it into a pattern that served the larger agenda of this superstate. For evidence of this, just consider the tight correlation in timing between the date of the Roswell incident and the date when the National Security Act of 1947 was passed. Roswell happened in early July, and only a few weeks later, the National Security Act was pushed through. Clearly, Roswell helped grease the wheels for the passing of this National Security Act, and it was this act that formally allowed for the U.S. national security state to restructure itself along the lines the technocracy had originally planned, creating a vast, permanent, secret Black Projects dimension within U.S. empire, one that the technocracy was now positioned to essentially control. So you see how that all fits together to continue this project that really has been in the works for decades. So this is something that we'll be looking at more in the next section. It's called the UFO as an instrument of social engineering. All right, the UFO as an instrument of social engineering. Stepping back and looking at the UFO mystery as a whole, we discover that there are likely three tiers to America's domestic Black Projects empire, each engaging with the UFO topic in a different way. First, there is an original, highly mysterious program derived from 19th century secret societies. This program is dedicated to gaining mastery over the alchemical mysteries of the luminiferous ether. Then there is a second program, created sometime later as a result of a long-range plan set up by the first group. The second program is the one originally harvested from Nazi Germany. It is also interested in alchemy and etheric energy, but its understanding is less advanced than the first group. In my view, the first group was behind the creation of this second program, and its initiates and disciples are infused into it. Once it became established in America, this second program quickly evolved to become the entity I'm calling the technocratic superstate. Finally, there was a third program, one begun after the inspiration of Roswell. The primary orientation of this program, the lowest of the three, is to reverse engineer captured alien technology. In reality, the technology this third program is seeking to reverse engineer is not from aliens, but rather from one or the other of the two superior groups above it. Thus, the overall picture that emerges is one in which the entire U.S. empire plays host to three nested levels of top-secret UFO programs, with a higher program disguised from a lower program at each level. The post-Roswell program is the lowest level, the German-derived technocratic superstate program is the intermediary, and the 19th century secret society program is the most elite. Almost certainly, the two higher-level programs came together to engineer the lower, the Roswell-related operation, the one pointing the finger at aliens. They most likely came together to carry out this operation by first creating the craft, engineering its materials so as to present a deliberate puzzle to the military scientists who would later study it after it was captured, and perhaps also engineering fake UFO beings. They ensured this puzzle would be seeded into the hands of the U.S. military by deliberately downing the craft so that it would be discovered in a pre-planned manner. This discovery would then trigger a number of secondary and tertiary consequences, ones aimed at bringing about a set of pre-prescribed solutions. Overall, the focus was on managing the worldview perceptions of the various groups who would become involved with the retrieval, cover-up, and reverse engineering operations. Beyond Roswell, there are indications that additional campaigns have also taken place to deliberately draw the U.S. military towards the conclusion that UFOs were the product of aliens and nothing else. For example, Annie Jacobsen, author of a book on Area 51, a secretive underground military facility located in the Nevada desert, discussed how one of the many covert black projects being run out of this base involved the task of surgically transfiguring handicapped children, giving them an alien-like appearance so that they could be used as part of a greater project to sell the alien meme as the consensus explanation for UFOs. In her book, she also cites a source who told her that the flying saucer captured in Roswell was not alien in origin, but was actually based on a model created by two German engineers known as the Horten brothers, who had previously been involved in Nazi Germany's wartime Black Projects empire. They had been captured and harvested into America after the war, along with a number of other Kammerstab scientists and engineers. Of course, the alien meme helped cover up this fact. In my eyes, all this evidence indicates that the Roswell crash was an operation deliberately conceived and implemented by the technocratic superstate, using assets it had obtained from Nazi Germany after the war, such as the Horten brothers, to carry it out. The aim of this operation was to sell the idea of an alien presence to the lower echelons of the military hierarchy, so that they would be inspired to play along with the technocratic superstate's greater plans to re-engineer the entire architecture of the U.S. national security state toward a new paradigm of governance. This new paradigm is one based around the technocratic superstate's need to fulfill its triple mandate of secrecy, empire, and technology. This superstate is the real power player behind world affairs, its existence concealed deep within the heart of American empire, which it uses as an instrument, a means to an end, this end being the establishment of global government. Notably, the alien psyop is not targeted primarily at the public. Rather, its main focus seems to be to manipulate the psychology of the U.S. military command. The alien psyop is aimed primarily at influencing the worldview of those in Washington, getting them to willingly accept certain pre-planned changes to the U.S. governance system and to the inner architecture of U.S. empire. The central theme of these changes is to shift power into a centralized technocratic superstate, one whose main base of operations is not in Washington or in Wall Street, but rather within secret underground facilities like Area 51. If we can keep this explanation in mind, we can make sense of a lot of what happened after 1947. For one, as our timeline moves from the late 40s into the 50s, we find the Cold War ramping up and a permanent war economy being created. Then, the petrodollar system is fashioned, with America's military might spread around the world to protect and enforce it. Within this environment, the black budget economy begins taking shape and a secret parallel system of finance is established, its purpose being to fund a permanent matrix of off-the-books, deep, black projects. During this time, we also find UFO sightings and encounters exploding everywhere, but always in a deliberately mysterious fashion. Sightings become commonplace, not just in the public realm, but also within the U.S., Navy, Air Force, and other military departments. The phenomenon is now impossible to ignore and is being taken very seriously within the inner command structure of the U.S. national security state. This is indicated by a 1949 FBI memo, which Richard Dolan cites in his book. This memo, quote, stated bluntly that the matter of flying saucers was considered top secret by intelligence officers of both the Army and the Air Forces. In the memo, it is emphasized that many of the UFO sightings have taken place around military installations, as if they were part of a targeted operation aimed at inciting a deliberate response within the command structure of the U.S. military. For example, Dolan tells us that the secret FBI memo describes, quote, disturbing unexplained events over Los Alamos and a variety of other military installations. Indeed, there have been many UFO encounters by the various militaries of the world, especially that of the U.S. Many of these sightings seem deliberately orchestrated to troll the U.S. military command, antagonizing them in a strategic manner and making sure that the issue won't be ignored. For example, UFO encounters took place at several American and Russian ICBM sites during the Cold War. Sometimes power outages accompanied these sightings. At other times, targeted guidance information was deliberately altered and then returned to normal. And in a few instances, actual launch sequences were remotely initiated and then remotely canceled. There were also numerous reports of UFO sightings around nuclear tests. Richard Dolan informs us that 1952 was a particularly important year for these targeted UFO encounters. In one notable instance taking place in April of that year, quote, two powerful members of America's defense establishment had a dramatic UFO encounter. U.S. Secretary of the Navy, Dan Kimball, was flying from California to Hawaii when he saw two disc-shaped objects moving at an incredibly fast speed, later estimated to be about 1,500 miles per hour. They circled Kimball's plane twice and then departed. 50 miles to the east, another craft, carrying U.S. Navy Admiral Arthur Redford, encountered what appeared to be the same objects. They circled his aircraft, then zoomed upward and out of sight. Kimball reported his encounter to the Air Force and was unhappy with what he believed was its stonewalling on UFOs. Later that year, as Dolan also tells us, matters culminated for 2 consecutive weekends over the nation's capital, when multiple UFOs were tracked on radar and seen visually by quite a few people. On both occasions, Air Force interceptors were sent. Pilots got close enough to track down the unknowns but were unable to catch up. The events were so significant that they made the front page of the New York Times. The payoff for these UFO encounters came in the fall when the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence organized an official panel whose purpose was to, quote, study UFOs scientifically. From this would come a formal policy recommendation. Informing us more about the background context that inspired the formation of this panel, Dolan cites a message from, quote, the director of the office, H. Marshall Chadwell, who wrote to his boss, the director of the CIA, Walter Bedell Smith, stating, and this is from the message, quote, at this time, the reports of incidents convince us that there is something going on which must have immediate attention. Sightings of unexplained objects at great altitudes and traveling at high speeds in the vicinity of major U.S. defense installations are of such a nature that they are not attributable to natural phenomena or known types of aerial vehicles. In other words, these UFOs appear to be technological and under intelligent control. This was the emergency the CIA panel, called the Robertson Panel, was set up to investigate. However, as Dolan points out, the investigation was staged. He notes that, quote, the panel's conclusions were written before its members even met. The panel's official conclusion was that the UFO was likely alien in origin, but not a direct threat to national security, as they emphasized. Instead, the panel pointed the finger at information leakage about the topic as being the biggest threat to U.S. national security interests. The panel warned that UFOs, quote, could pose an indirect threat only if reports from the general public or within the military were to overwhelm communication channels. Members of the panel therefore emphasized the need to manage public opinion regarding UFOs, particularly by debunking the topic. The panel's purpose was essentially to pave the way for the technocratic superstates' desire for a policy of all-encompassing secrecy and project compartmentalization to be adopted at every level of the U.S. national security state. This was the pre-planned conclusion the panel was set up to advocate for. Based on this framing of things, a widespread policy of secrecy and compartmentalization was to be implemented at every level of the U.S. national security complex, making it, quote, all but impossible to inquire within the military into the matter, at least through official channels. The whole thing was to be taken deeply black, in other words. Looking at the larger story of what the events of 1952 signal, Dolan remarks that what the panel's conclusions signify is that the split in opinion within the national security state about how to address the UFO topic had been deliberately resolved. The extraterrestrial hypothesis was accepted and secrecy became the rule. This conclusion then became the rationale for increasing the information clampdown on anything related to UFOs, with the information lockdown now extending much farther down the ladder than ever before. From this point onward, for the remainder of the 1950s down to the present day, the official U.S. Air Force and government policy would be to assign the topic of UFOs and flying saucers, as Dolan puts it, to the realm of oblivion. Indeed, as Dolan comments, by the early 1960s, it appeared that the Air Force, the CIA, and their allies had succeeded in almost completely removing the UFO phenomenon from public discussion. In the meantime, while official government policy position toward the public was denial, the alien hypothesis for UFO origins was gaining steam, at least within the national security state itself. It was now the preferred consensus explanation within the lower tiers of the Black Project's world used to explain the UFO phenomenon. As Joseph P. Farrell informs us, by the mid-1950s, various American leaders had already gone on record with their belief that UFOs were the products of an advanced extraterrestrial technology. For example, General Douglas MacArthur, speaking in 1955, declared that, quote, the nations of the world will have to unite, for the next war will be an interplanetary war. The nations of the world must someday make a common front against attack by people from other planets. That's from MacArthur. This theme was repeated 4 years later by former Nazi rocket scientist turned NASA lead engineer Wernher von Braun, a man who was originally brought over as part of the infamous Operation Paperclip program. In a speech to West Point cadets in 1959, von Braun stated that, quote, we find ourselves faced by powers which are far stronger than we had hitherto assumed, and whose base is at present unknown to us. More I cannot say at present. We are now engaged in entering into closer contact with those powers, and in 6 or 9 months' time, it may be possible to speak with more precision on the matter. One thing is clear. The entire structure of the U.S. national security state was, after 1947, systematically re-engineered to accommodate the UFO secret. Richard Dolan, for example, cites one senior American defense scientist, Dr. Robert Sarbacher, as having said in 1950 that, quote, the matter of UFOs was the most highly classified subject in the United States government, rating higher even than the H-bomb. The environment of secrecy and compartmentalization that this status engenders is one that creates the perfect condition for an extremely secret, very deep black project to be run within and through an outer network of subsidiary black projects, which together serve to mask the existence of the main program. As Joseph P. Farrell explains, quote, black projects are so tightly organized and compartmentalized that a low-level technician working on a particular piece or component of a project may not even know what that component is ultimately for, nor what others involved in the project are working on. Only senior-level managers will know the larger picture. This fact allows the possibility that any given project can be infiltrated or co-opted from an outside source, infiltrating personnel into the various levels of the project. What if the ultimate deep black project at the core of this system wasn't about aliens at all, but rather aimed at implementing an all-encompassing social re-engineering operation upon the world population, one that featured the triple mandates of global government, global security, and breakthrough technology? The UFO mystery, with all the various levels of intrigue, misinformation, and concealment that surround it, serves as an ideal mechanism for bringing about an architecture of black projects nested within black projects, a structure that the technocratic superstate highly desires. One thing is clear: deep within the black project shadow realm of the U.S. national security state, an entirely secret infrastructure has been set up to develop secret classified technologies, the most important of these being those dealing with the alchemical mysteries of the luminiferous ether. The mid-1950s seems to have been a critical period within the technocratic superstate for the development of anti-gravity technologies based around the principles of luminiferous ether. For example, Nick Cook, in his book The Hunt for Zero Point, shares how he uncovered an old magazine article from a mid-50s era aerospace journal. In this article, a leading aerospace engineer named George S. Trimble was profiled. The article states that, quote, Trimble of the Martin Aircraft Company, backed by his counterparts in other aerospace firms across the USA, was talking up the conquest of gravity and the impact this breakthrough would have on air and space flight. The world, they announced, was poised on the brink of an era in which free, clean energy would be the norm. And one day, they predicted, it would take us to the stars. These sentiments were mirrored in a 1955 New York Herald Tribune article, which stated in unequivocal terms that, quote, the initial steps of an almost incredible program to solve the secret of gravity and universal gravitation are being taken today in many of America's top scientific laboratories and research centers. A number of major, long-established companies in the United States, aircrafts, and electronics industries are also involved in gravity research. Synthesizing this information, Cook concludes that, quote, the evidence was suggesting that in the mid-50s, there had been some kind of breakthrough in the anti-gravity field, and for a small window in time, people had talked about it freely and openly, believing that they were witnessing the dawn of a new era, one that would benefit the whole of mankind. But then quickly, the information control grid swept in, and as Cook tells us, by 1957, everyone had stopped talking about it. All the companies that had been waxing to the rooftops about the coming anti-gravity revolution had fallen silent on the subject. By 1960, it was as if none of them had ever even thought of it. Had the military woken up to what was happening, bringing the clamps down? It seems as though a higher level of the technocratic superstate harvested these programs and brought them into its hidden black projects empire, disappearing them completely behind an impenetrable wall of secrecy. Almost certainly, the technocratic superstate already had other more advanced anti-gravity programs also in its portfolio. The reason it would have harvested these lower-level programs being run by the aerospace companies these two articles were profiling was because these lower-level projects had reached a critical threshold in terms of scientific breakthroughs and thus couldn't be allowed to operate on their own any longer. The scientific and technological paradigm they were working with couldn't go public yet, so these programs were bumped up to a new level of secrecy. Although the security lid was clamped down tight on anything related to anti-gravity research or ether physics after the 1950s, a few leaks have come out in recent decades informing us about some of the more recent activities that the black projects world has been engaged in. For example, Richard Dolan discusses the work of aerospace journalist James Goodall, who in the 80s and 90s, quote, interviewed quite a few members of the clandestine world, especially from within Groom Lake, Nevada, including Area 51. As a result of his interviews, Goodall concluded that there were at least 8 black programs flying out of Groom Lake, not counting the ones that were already known, such as the B-52 stealth bomber. One of these programs, he determined, was a silent flying triangle. Many of these used radical and highly unconventional technologies. Dolan also cites Ben Rich, the man who for many years headed Lockheed Martin's legendary Skunk Works division. During the 80s and 90s, near the end of his life, he made several startlingly open statements about the reality of UFOs. In these statements, he makes it clear that, quote, the technology within the classified world was vastly beyond anything imaginable in the public realm. Ben Rich also reportedly expressed the opinion that, quote, it is time to end the secrecy on this, as it no longer poses a national security threat, and make the technology available for use in the private sector. But he also cautioned, quote, there are many in the intelligence community who would like to see this stay in the black and not see the light of day. Researcher Joseph P. Farrell has also uncovered valuable information about the ongoing covert activities of this secret Black Projects empire. In particular, he cites a 1988 Gung Ho magazine article, which quoted an unnamed Lockheed engineer as saying, quote, let's put it this way, we have things flying in the Nevada desert that would make George Lucas drool. This same article also quoted an Air Force officer as saying, quote, we are testing vehicles that defy description. To compare them conceptually to the SR-71 would be like comparing Leonardo da Vinci's parachute design to the space shuttle. One quote featured in the article is particularly revealing, getting to the heart of what the Roswell PSYOP is really all about. It was given by an unnamed colonel who stated, quote, we have things that are so far beyond the comprehension of the average aviation authority as to be really alien to our way of thinking. In other words, the real alien invasion isn't from extraterrestrial life forms coming down from outer space. It's from highly secret and very advanced human groups here on Earth rising to take custodianship of planetary governance. The way of thinking and living practiced by these human groups are truly alien in comparison to our normal habitual modes of thinking and living. For example, the mystery school's way of existing and thinking is so alien to the normal way of life of the average person that it might as well be from another planet. Actually, it is the mystery schools and its initiates who are the real alien presence on Earth. They are the real space brothers, quote unquote, only they come to us from inner space rather than outer space. This helps explain one of the main mysteries of the UFO issue. Even once we admit that government UFO programs exist, the sheer volume of sightings that have taken place suggests that another entity behind that and beyond that of the technocratic superstate is responsible for producing at least some of them. As Richard Dolan tells us, every indication points to the number of UFO witnesses reaching not into the thousands, but well into the millions. So who is it that is responsible for producing them, at least the ones we aren't producing ourselves? There is therefore an inevitable need for something beyond just America's Black Projects empire to explain the existence of UFOs. There are too many of them, and their traces extend too far back in history for them to have all been produced by America's technocratic superstate. So is this greater hidden hand aliens, or is it the mystery schools with its hierarchy of alchemical masters that are responsible? As you know, my vote is on the latter explanation. In my view, the master alchemists in the mystery schools are the ones responsible for orchestrating the deepest elements of the UFO mystery. It is part of a greater mystery ritual they are orchestrating from on high, a great symbolic pageantry purposely designed to steer mankind into the enaction of an unforgettable mystery play. One that promises to alchemically transform the entire body of human civilization and the process of us going through it. And that's the end of that section. We're going to be picking up that line of thought in this concluding section of not only the article, but the whole chapter. And this last section is called The UFO Mystery as an Initiation Ritual. And that's coming right up. All right, final section, The UFO Mystery as an Initiation Ritual. As I've argued at several key points throughout this chapter, human society is archetypally structured around a four-tiered caste system, one governed by the same alchemical principles as nature itself. Here we find society naturally self-organizing into four tiers, these representing the four elements of alchemy. These four elemental levels are then circumscribed by a fifth, which represents the spiritual hierarchy behind the mystery school system. In the modern iteration of this archetypal caste system, the four elements involved are as follows. A, at the bottom level is a large labor caste, this representing the element earth. B, above this is a more elite level of aristocracy and oligarchy representing water. C, above this is the level of the state, representing the element fire, which is today dominated by an entity I've been calling the technocratic superstate. And then D, at the apex, representing the element air, resides a caste of initiate teachers who together serve as ambassadors for a yet greater transcendent spiritual entity, the mystery schools, which personify the fifth element, ether. So the mystery schools you can really think of as being split on two levels. There's the bottom level that's associated with this element air, and then there's a higher level that's associated with this element ether. And that's a transcendent, meaning beyond the physical plane. And then the initiates and the ambassadors, they work on the physical plane to fulfill the larger goals of this transcendent institution. The mysteries are an archetypal institution, meaning that they are an ever-present aspect of human life, taking different forms in different ages. In the modern age, its initiates take the form of philosopher scientists, such as those depicted in Francis Bacon's short story New Atlantis. In the previous age, they came forth as philosopher priests, and their domicile was primarily in the temple. In the modern scientific era, the new home of the mysteries is not in the temple, but the university. Its interest is not in religion, but in science. In this manner, in the modern age, the mysteries incarnate in a form that Francis Bacon called the Invisible College. This is the elite entity behind the technocratic superstate, which is the most powerful governing body in America, it being in control of America's secret empire of black projects. The centerpiece of the technocratic superstate is a central think tank, which connects all its various levels and branches together. This is the brain of the operation, and this is the place that the modern-day mystery schools are focusing their operations on. The technocratic superstate is a creation that the mystery schools, the world's apex secret society, deliberately worked to set up in the decades and even centuries that preceded the superstate's formal establishment in 1945. This technocratic superstate was a necessary creation for the mystery schools. It gave them a new vehicle they could use in order to fulfill their larger initiatic agenda. Once the industrial age hit and the institution of science came to displace that of religion as the dominant influence in society, a new paradigm of governance was needed, one tailor-made to manage the complex new social environment the industrial age had brought to bear. The technocratic superstate was the solution. It was the entity chosen to accomplish the build-out of a global science-based world order. It was also an entity that, at the right time, could be transformed into something else. A vehicle of the philosophic empire, the long-planned governance regime dreamed of by mystery school initiates such as Plato. Consider the all-pervading culture of secrecy that surrounds the technocratic superstate and the covert empire of black projects it oversees. Is this not similar to the all-pervading culture of secrecy typical of the mystery schools? The mystery schools were premised upon their custodianship of a secret category of knowledge termed esoteric or occult. The modern concept of classified information is very similar to this older archetype. Both reference the existence of a special category of knowledge that is sensitive and valuable, and therefore only safely made available to an elite network of insiders or initiates who have been properly vetted and given clearance to access it. Furthermore, we know that in the age of classical civilization, such as that which we find in ancient Greece and Rome, initiates were forbidden from disclosing the secrets of their order to the uninitiated masses upon penalty of death. Is not the same thing true of those working in this Black Project's world, where information disclosure is forbidden, and being a whistleblower often means paying the price with your life? In our current era, is the policy of absolute secrecy we see emerging within the U.S. deep state indicative of the fact that the mystery schools are now operating within, behind, and through it? In my view, it is. We know that, back in the early 17th century, Francis Bacon's secret society, the Rosicrucians, a modern mystery school, first began its migration over to the North American continent. We also know that this secret order was the primary player involved with bringing about the American Revolution, which would take place 150 years later. The question is, what happened to this secret order after the Revolution? It was the main player on the world stage right up to its completion. But then, as soon as the Constitution is signed, it disappears once again from public view. Where did it go? Where were the mystery schools during the rise of the scientific and industrial ages? Did it just disappear? Or did it reformat itself to meet a new set of challenges, ones unique to the era of science and industry that the world was moving into? With the transition of the world from an agrarian to an industrial-based economy, and with the rise of a new American oligarchical power base in conjunction with this transition, the mystery schools needed a new, updated form to work through. The Freemasonic order, the outer vehicle this secret society was previously working through, has served it well during the Revolutionary era, but now a new form was needed, one it could use to bring about the next phase in its great plan. Doesn't it make sense that the new organizational vehicle the Mysteries would move into and occupy is one that would be tailor-made to be positioned at the apex point of America's vast military, industrial, financial machinery? Wouldn't a science-centered, technology-focused, secrecy-maintaining, globalism-seeking institution such as the technocratic superstate be a perfect vehicle for the mystery schools to inhabit? A vehicle ideally designed to fulfill its long-term vision for human civilization, while at the same time concealing its existence behind a wall of secrecy and project compartmentalization. The vision for how the mystery schools would operate in the scientific age was first revealed by one of its greatest initiates, Francis Bacon, back in the early decades of the 17th century. The great philosopher Manly P. Hall, another prominent mystery school initiate, informs us how, quote, in his famous work, The New Atlantis, Francis Bacon foretells of a philosophic empire ruled over by enlightened men, which is someday to be established upon the earth. In the midst of this empire is the city of wisdom, and in the midst of this city, a university of the arts and sciences named Solomon's House. Looking at the symbolism behind the story, we discover that Solomon's House is actually a reference to a central mystery school. In the pattern revealed in Bacon's short story, this mystery school is to be embedded in a larger structure, a quote-unquote city of wisdom. Could this city of wisdom refer to a philosophically inspired global governance structure, one that the technocratic superstate may one day evolve into becoming? If this is the vision, it looks like the architecture of American empire is being engineered to gradually become the literal embodiment of this ideal. The American nation is, and has been since the beginning of its foundation, a vehicle through which the ultimate New Atlantis archetype envisioned by Francis Bacon is to one day be fulfilled. The goal of Francis Bacon's Invisible College, i.e. his real-world Solomon's House, which was set up in America since the beginning of its founding, has been to incrementally set the stage for a transition of world civilization into a formally integrated pattern of global governance. In the final stage of this process, as the system of global government is being implemented, a global mystery school will reveal itself and take control, enthroning itself at the center of the world nation. In this new era, the technocratic superstate, the oligarchy, the outer structures of world society all become transformed into one seamless global creation with a cast of initiate teachers, the quote-unquote philosophic elect, becoming the guides, instructors, and inspirers of the global order. Within the body of the mystery school, each of the four lower castes will find its place, such that the four elements of the collective human organism will once again function in a harmonious and integrated fashion. This is what the New Atlantis is really all about, relinking and reharmonizing the various elements constituting the world's soul back together once again, bringing them to a state of alchemical perfection where a great transmutation can take place within the collective soul. The point of all of our lives is to help bring this about, for the reason that we are each, as individuals, actually mere component parts of this one overarching world soul. By successfully rising in the ranks of the mystery schools, we learn to accomplish the great alchemical transmutation within ourselves. And in so doing, we actually serve to advance the greater spiritual evolution of the world soul, for the reason that whatever happens to us also happens to the world soul as well, since we are actually one and the same. So when we alchemically transform ourselves as individuals, we also enact a concurrent alchemical transmutation within the world soul as a whole. In other words, the world soul attains its own enlightenment through us. It experiences it at the same moment we as individuals experience it, for the reason that once again, we are one and the same. The industrial age is a mere phase in the larger and longer evolutionary growth story of the world soul. This evolutionary growth story is moving toward attaining an archetypal end state preordained by law. Therefore, the scientific epoch we are now collectively living through, it being a phase within the life of this greater world soul, is also by definition being driven toward the attainment of an archetypal end state. Bacon described for us what this end state is conceptually supposed to look like, revealing this vision in his novel New Atlantis. The end state of the present age is to become a global nation, the city of wisdom. At the center of this city is to be a university or mystery school whose initiates are to be tasked with leading and guiding collective society into a future golden age. In his story, Bacon reveals the core ideology followed by the initiates of Solomon's House, which he gives out through a short speech by the university's headmaster. Describing the objective of his order, he states that, quote, "The end of our foundation is the knowledge of causes, and the secret motions of things, and the enlarging of the bounds of human empire to the effecting of all things possible." Is this not the same goal that the technocratic superstate is trying to achieve on its own level? If one interprets knowledge of causes as alchemical understanding of the mysteries of etheric energy, then the aims of each are identical. Both are seeking global civilization, and both are seeking to use science as a means to engineer it into being. The new Atlantis is the final archetype, the ideal form of what the technocratic superstate can one day become. Before this can happen, the science used within the technocratic superstate must first discover and embrace the principles of esoteric philosophy. Once it does, and once its scientists evolve to become philosopher scientists, the archetype Francis Bacon initially envisioned will have finally been achieved. Let's now stop and take these insights and apply them to everything we've learned in this 10-part analysis of the secret history of the 20th century. Over the course of this series, the overall picture we put together is one where a new governance entity, a technocratic superstate, was gradually prepared for and given birth to. Once born, the mission of this technocratic superstate was to essentially manage America's covert black projects empire. More specifically, it came to adopt 3 core operational mandates. First, to secretly develop a new paradigm of ether-based science and technology. Second, to put in place an information control grid and global security network, the purpose of which is to protect the new paradigms of science and technology it was developing. And third, the implementation of an all-encompassing social engineering operation, one designed to eventually bring about a global system of government. When we factor in the idea that a mystery school is secretly inhabiting this technocratic superstate and is actually driving it to achieve these 3 ends for its own greater purposes, then we come to understand that what's actually happening is that the quote-unquote social engineering campaign or social engineering operation being carried out by the technocratic superstate is actually a veiled global initiation initiative being orchestrated by the mystery school who is operating within and behind this superstate. This grand initiation project is one that has been worked towards for thousands of years. It is the secret plan of the ages, the grand agenda of the mystery schools. The fulfillment of this great plan in our age is intimately related to the secret destiny of America, and we are on the cusp of a major breakthrough in that campaign. A major transition point is coming. The overarching initiatic plan that is taking place through current world events is one that was likely planned out and set in motion thousands of years ago by the sages of the mystery schools, who foresaw the coming of the Kali Yuga and set out to formulate a great mystery play to initiate the human soul with during it, as it navigated itself through the difficulties of this materialistic age. Man learns from experience, and the grand saga we have collectively been through since the onset of the Kali Yuga has set the stage for a great collective initiation ritual to take place. This is the principal mission of the mystery schools, to bring this initiation ritual to completion. Because through initiation, the evolution of the human soul is made complete. And through the evolution of the human soul, the world's soul as a whole is also brought towards completion, its own greater evolution being accomplished through us. So the mystery schools are actually involved with fulfilling a divine mission, one that encompasses the great hidden agenda of fulfilling the evolutionary unfoldment of a great divine being, a supreme spiritual entity. This entity is the one life behind the many lives. The earth itself is the body of this God, the solar system its soul, and the constellations its spirit. This is the core truth the alien hypothesis misses, that all life in the solar system is part of one life, so there is nothing actually alien in existence. The entire alien meme plays on our ignorance of this simple philosophic truth, and is therefore symptomatic of the greater ignorances characteristic of our age. Recall our earlier discussions on how the symbolism encoded in the Shakespeare plays was designed by Francis Bacon's secret society in order to personify certain archetypal ignorances characteristic of the age. Could the alien psyop have been designed by a similar, or perhaps even the same, entity, one experienced in manipulating symbolism in order to effect large-scale social and psychological changes? In the scientific age, could a legacy institution derived from Francis Bacon's original Knights of the Helmet Society, a branch of his larger Rosicrucian order, have turned its attention toward the task of weaving together the various levels of symbolism involved with the modern-day UFO mystery? The UFO mystery serves as the central symbol around which a grand initiatic program has been carried out. It is a mystery play, a collective ritual that the entire body of mankind is being put through. In this way, the UFO mystery, with all its various layers of symbolism and meaning, can altogether be read as a living, breathing mandala, a meditation symbol embodying a deep spiritual truth and lesson. In this way, as you begin unraveling the various levels of the UFO mystery, you inevitably discover that what you're actually doing is unraveling the deeper mysteries of human existence itself. The UFO is therefore a symbol, one that, when correctly read, points to the existence of the mystery schools. By solving the UFO mystery, you become yourself initiated and discover that all along the point of the mystery play was to lead you to the doorstep of the mysteries. Then, as a next step, you go inside. And this becomes the gateway to the new golden age. So that's the end. That's the end of this long chapter. And it ties, hopefully, everything together and links it to everything that we've been going over up till now. So I hope you all enjoyed that series, and I'm curious to see if you agree with my thesis here. But time will tell if it's true or not. And like I said in the article, it seems that we're moving towards a transition point and something significant happening. I mean, significant things are happening when you start adding up all the situations that have been going on since 2020. And I also want to just suggest to anybody who hasn't listened to it yet, I have a long interview with Peter Dawkins where we talk about some of these themes. And he is also of the opinion that we are in a critical moment in time when major transformations are capable of taking place. And so perhaps this UFO mystery is a catalyst for these type of transformations and is setting the stage for a big initiatic moment. So for now, I leave you. I will be back soon with a couple episodes where I'm going to go over some clips and do some commentary. I've done this kind of format a lot with Manly Hall lectures, but I'm going to do it now with some of the figures who I've cited in this overall chapter, and we'll hear from them in their own words. And I'll try to put this, link them all together to kind of mirror the basic structure that I was putting together in this chapter. So anyway, those will be kind of like standalone episodes that serve to overview and recap some of what we've been doing this past 11-part series. And then after that, I'm going to move into a long, it's not to be as long as this one, but this will be a several-part series on Manly Hall, probably 4 parts. And then I have one more chapter after that, and then that'll be the end of this book on philosophy. And I'm excited to be going into all that information. So until then, once again, this is Alex Sakin, and this is the Wisdom Tradition Podcast. Thanks for listening, and God bless.